Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast. Here's your host, Chris Lee. Commodore fans, on your feet. It's time to anchor down.
Welcome to the Vandy Sports Podcast presented by Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. We are part of the 440 Sports Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. Today's podcast will feature Luke Wyatt. We'll talk Vanderbilt baseball and basketball. Luke appears on the guest line that's presented by Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group. Michael's a local carpenter and a lifelong Vandy fan. He builds bookshelves, cabinets, picture frames, furniture, and made-to-order items, including a display case from a prized Dale Murphy jersey. I've seen Michael's work. He's a true craftsman. If you're in the market for custom woodwork, give Michael a call, 615-830-9458. Now on to our interview with Luke. Luke Wyatt joins me today, literally fresh off a trip to Arlington. He drove out there, he drove back. He saw Vanderbilt beat Texas, beat Oklahoma State, lose to TCU. I'm guessing you watched some basketball on TV in between. Luke, thanks for joining us. I know that had to be an exhausting trip.
It was fun. I like to drive. A lot of people would rather fly anything, but anything within 10 or 12 hours, I'll drive it. I'll drive 6 hours, stop, and then go another 6 the next morning. But anyway, that's the life of being retired, half retired. Anyway, I had a great time. Globe Life Field is a wonderful place. If you had never been there, please go sometime, catch a baseball game. It's controlled environment with the roof was on the entire tournament. 72 degrees, great concessions, very clean, neat place. I enjoyed it. I really did. I didn't watch any of the other teams play much, but I did enjoy the Commodores. Got a rough start, but then straightened things out, and I think we're going to be okay. I'm not worried a bit about us.
Yeah, I called you after Friday. I just didn't like the way that game went. It had a lot of hallmarks of the things that frustrated people last year down the stretch. The watching strikes go by, the inability to throw strikes, and you just said, hey, let's wait and see how it goes the next 2 days. Your intuition on that was right. And look, you always ask questions and have doubts, but I did think the way they recovered the next 2 days made a pretty good statement.
Yeah, I would say this, and let's start with negative, if you want to call it negative, of the things we need to work on. Too many walks, too many hit batsmen. But now, that happened a lot from both teams, from all the teams we played. Both. So you can contribute that to being the first weekend of the season, I guess. I didn't think. I thought our pitching depth. We pitched, I think, 11 kids, and you may know more than I do on that, Chris. And I think Doolin is the only one right now that's not able physically to pitch. So of the 16 pitchers, there's only 5 we didn't see. We didn't see 5 guys over the weekend. So we got to see 11 different arms out there for at least a couple of batters. I was impressed by probably over half of them. I felt like Carter was nothing but control. He couldn't control some of his pitches. I thought Hunter Owen pitched his B game, not his A game. I was really impressed Sunday with both pitchers, Bryce Cunningham and Devin Futrell. I thought they both did a great job. And then Maldonado did a great job finishing up that Oklahoma State game.
No, look, I think the pitching staff will get a lot better. They've got a lot of talent. Scott Brown's got a track record for having pretty good staffs. But the one thing that's been an issue for years has been the free passes. And look, it's the case most places. But I look around the SEC, you had a bunch of teams that a free pass is a walk or a hit batsman. You had several teams in the league that had 5, 6, 7 for the whole weekend. And I get that you pitch differently when the guys that you're facing off are from, I don't know, Charleston Southern instead of from Oklahoma State or TCU. But I don't understand the disconnect why so many other teams are throwing strikes with lesser arms other than that, and Vanderbilt's not right now.
Maybe, I guess, and I paid attention to this a lot. We got a lot of 2 strikes on hitters. We were either ahead 1-2 or it's 2-2, and we wind up walking them. That's the part where we nibble too much. I don't know.
That's been a criticism for a few years. Yeah,
that's the only thing I saw that was again a negative. But again, first weekend of the season. Now, if we come out Tuesday, Wednesday against Central Arkansas and UAB, and you have the same problem, then you start to worry a little bit. But I felt overall, we got 16 pitchers, maybe 17 if Doolin's able to come back. Of all those guys, surely you can find 10 that'll work. And I think there's for sure maybe even more than 10 that can pitch well on most days. I felt like a couple of times, especially with Leboke, you left him in the game too long maybe. And I know you always say that when things don't go well, you always say that. But that's the only criticism, if I have any, from the weekend. I felt like our bats were awesome. You score, and I realize Texas helped us out a ton yesterday, but you still score that many runs. You average 9 runs a game. That's going to win you most games.
I'll get back to the pitching in a minute, but one of the things the last year or two, it seemed like they didn't get runs early. It seemed like the bats would be cold the first time through the order and sometimes the second time through. They jumped on Oklahoma State and Texas both early, really early. What was it? 9 or 18 runs combined in the first 2 innings against each of those, something like that. That was decidedly different. And look, when you do that too, when you jump out to a big lead, maybe you pitch a little differently, you've got a little bit more margin there. I won't totally discount that, although I don't believe that's really the reason, but just throwing that in there. But yeah, I thought it was a very decidedly different approach, and I thought that they were a lot more aggressive earlier in counts the next, especially on Saturday, and I thought that really paid off for them.
I agree with you 100%. Now, even some of the unearned run, when Espinal hit the grand slam after the errors by Texas, some of those balls that we hit, even though they were right at them, were smoked. So we were hitting the ball. Those guys, those weren't just terrible errors when you look back on it. But I think if you look at the lineup as a whole, Chris, and I don't want to pick on anybody, but I'll just say it. The only kid throughout the lineup that really didn't have many good at-bats was Bolger. I felt like his at-bats were very similar to what we saw last year. I think he maybe hit one hard ball to third base, but he didn't hit the barrel much, and I'm a little concerned with Jack. He needs to be a part of that lineup, and either as a DH or a catcher. And something else I noticed while it's on my mind, did you happen to notice that R.J. Schreck, after he misjudged that fly ball, which really cost us in the Oklahoma State game, the very next day he's DHing and T.J. McKenzie's in right?
Yeah, I think I missed that. There were some innings on Saturday. It's really the only thing I missed. My daughter had a playoff basketball game, and so there was some time in the car where I didn't see anything or hear anything, and some time where I was in the stands watching her and not the phone, so I didn't catch what happened there.
No, what happened there was in their big inning when Oklahoma State got back in the game, I think we were up, 9-2 or something. They made it 9-7, I think, or something like that. Anyway, that inning was a lot of walks, hit batsmen, and then we got a chance to get out number 2. There's a high fly ball to right field, and I don't know if Schreck lost it or got a bad jump, but Enrique had some words with him, and then, because the ball dropped and run scored. And maybe they were planning on playing TJ and right yesterday anyway. I don't know. But it was obvious to me that, okay, look, if you're not going to be able to play the outfield, and it's one play, I get it, it's one play, but it was obvious to me. Very next day, he's not in there. I mean, he's hitting, but he's not back out in right field.
Well, I don't think it's coincidence that places, when I was asking around about concerns, probably the 2 biggest concerns I heard were defense behind the plate, defense in right. I don't know that they're sure they have a true right fielder, and the catching situation, I think, is about to be very up in the air.
Well, Espinal defensively by far is their best catcher. I think I haven't seen, of course, Poteet and Law play, but I think Espinal is head and tails above Jack behind the plate. Now, I don't know about calling the game, but I'm saying defensively, throwing and the way he moves back there and that type of thing. That's why I think this team needs that other bat in Bulger. Now, Calvin Hewitt, Vastine, and Parker Nolan had great weekends. Those three guys hit the ball on the screws when they didn't get hits, and they all got multiple hits as well. So I felt really good about the way we swung the bat. There was a lot of barrel balls. There really was. And Shrek just missed a couple. I mean, he hit a couple of moon balls that if he hits it a little bit, stays back just a little bit, they're gone. He's a powerful kid. I can see that in him.
Vastine has looked tremendous, and the intel I got on him preseason was exactly that they were really confident in him. But Hewitt is the guy that I think Hewitt has been, underrated for about 3 years now. All that kid does, and I think TJ McKenzie is this in a lesser way, although Hewitt can do some things. He can defend a little bit. He's made some good plays. He can run. I don't know if McKenzie is a base stealing threat or not. Hewitt's already got 4. I know Hewitt has never been like a talked about draft guy. I don't think he was one of the more heralded prospects coming in. But man, that kid has just been a baseball player from the minute he got to campus. And man, it just seemed like he's even gotten better when I saw him this weekend.
Yeah, he was really, really good. TJ, his first at bats, he gets a double. He gets 2 doubles yesterday. I like TJ in right field. He only had a couple opportunities, but he didn't have any problem fielding the ball, and he's got good speed. TJ does. He did make an error on the bases yesterday, but besides that, he played really well. I think I'm you always, when one of those early in the year when you're playing that type of competition, you got to win 2 or 3. You want to win 2 or 3. And I felt good about it. Because, think about how Texas is feeling this morning. They went zipping 3 down there in their own basic tournament, them and TCU. I did think TCU looked like the best team there, not because they beat. They're really good. TCU's a top 10. They're an Omaha team possibly. But there was, of the teams there, the only team that I saw that doesn't look like an Omaha team to me with pitching and everything is Missouri and Texas. Although Missouri played well, I don't think they have enough depth in pitching to get to an Omaha. But I don't think Texas does either. Texas looked like they got a lot of problems.
Texas looked like the worst team in the field to me. Missouri looked shockingly good. I mean, I thought that they barreled a lot of balls. They found some pitching. And that's going to end up being good for Vanderbilt because that's going to be another team that I think Missouri is what I think it is, and I may end up looking like a fool here. But, you'd rather beat a team that's 40 in the RPI than one that's 140 in the RPI. And I have a feeling Missouri's closer to the first than the latter, and maybe even better than that.
Well, if you look around the league first weekend, I think our team, I think Vanderbilt, had as good a weekend as just about anybody. There's some teams that swept, but they weren't playing anybody. And then you've got Tennessee lose about a 3 to a non-ranked, and you got Mississippi State ahead 10-1 and gets beat by VMI 14-13. Georgia lost the game. Kentucky lost their opener to Elon. So there was a lot of. I think Vanderbilt did as good as anybody the first weekend.
Yeah, I think that the team that probably felt the best, I thought the teams that probably performed the best, and it's hard to say, but LSU, those guys threw strikes. Skeens was outstanding. He struck out 12 and 6, and boy, I'm sure every time they look at the box score, that rubs some salt in the wound. And I thought Florida played really well. Kentucky only gave up 3 runs all weekend. So that's another case where I thought like the bottom half of the league, other than maybe Mississippi State and Georgia, probably outperformed my expectations. And I get that beating weaklings is not a way to judge teams, but those teams didn't walk a lot of guys and give up a lot of runs. And after the pitching was just garbage last year, and some of these teams were giving up runs to anybody and everybody, it felt like I don't make conclusions based on a weekend like that. I know better. But if I had to guess, I would say some of those teams might be a little better than we thought, but that could also come apart in a hurry.
Here's my question for you. What do you think, the three guys that started this weekend, do you think we'll see the same three against UCLA?
Well, I mean, you're going to see Holton, and I'm pretty sure you're going to see Owen. I don't know if Futrell was going to be their third guy. Well, I mean, they didn't announce a guy prior to the weekend. And when you had to go through Dukanich that early, you had to go through, let's see, who else did they burn? Leboki was a guy that I thought might start for them, but he clearly, I don't know, he ran out of gas, around maybe pitch 30?
Yeah.
Maybe that's unfair, but the effectiveness was markedly, because I thought his four-seamer, I don't know what you could see in the stands, I thought his four-seamer, the first inning or two, was tremendous. And he looked a lot like the old guy. And then something happened where they were just getting everything squared up. And there was some talk of pitch tipping and stuff like that. And maybe that's what that was. And I guess you'd hope it is, rather than losing his velocity or effectiveness or movement, a couple of innings in. But I'm very interested to see how they handle the midweek. Not just because of the midweek, because like if you pitch guys too much in the midweek, then that probably tips your cap in terms of what you're going to do or not do against UCLA. In other words, let's say Dukanich comes back on Wednesday and throws relief and throws 30 pitches. I would presume. Well, I guess you couldn't say they couldn't use him against UCLA later. You're asking a question I've wondered about a lot. Futrell is a guy that's, in a lot of ways, fits in that spot, but I thought the effectiveness versus midweek teams and the effectiveness versus SEC teams seemed a lot different. Maybe it was a short sample size, but when your fastball tops out 91 or 92 and you don't dominate hitters, and you're kind of a guy that, it feels to me like his stuff plays best. Like his best game last year was at the Sounds Park, where he threw a complete game. It's spacious. The ball doesn't get out of there. That covers up for some stuff, and frankly, Bryce Cunningham is in that same boat, right? So I don't know. Man, that's a long-winded answer saying I don't know if you can trust Futrell against the stud Power 5 teams or not, but maybe we're about to find out. I don't know. I think how they use him or don't use him in the midweek will be. Well, and let me rewind that too, right? I don't know if you can bring a guy back on Wednesday after throwing 74 on Sunday. So maybe he's been cast next weekend already just by default.
Yeah. Here's the deal. Also, you've got five guys that didn't see any pitching that I'll assume would pitch these next two games, being Patrick Riley. You had Colton Reagan, and I think he had been sidelined a little bit. Maybe I heard that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's true.
And Jack Anderson didn't throw. Grayson Carter didn't throw. And one freshman, I think, J.D. Thompson, didn't throw. Those are the five that didn't throw. So you got to figure you're going to see them Tuesday and Wednesday at some point.
I think you will see, my guess is that you'll probably see Grayson Carter. You'll probably see Patrick Riley start tomorrow. That would also leave him available for UCLA. I don't know what the trust level is going to be there, but when it works, it can really work at times. And my guess is you see Grayson Carter start Wednesday.
Yeah, because the other three guys are bullpen guys, right?
I mean, I guess midweek a bullpen guy can be your first guy in a committee. So it just depends on how you use the term.
Well, you have to look at this too. Schultz and Maldonado didn't throw many pitches at all. They threw single-digit pitches.
That's true. And you could get both those guys back, in games and stretch them out for 2 innings. You could stretch Schultz out for 2 in one of the midweeks, and you could do Maldonado for 3 if you wanted. Although, if you're going to do that, you probably do that Tuesday and not Wednesday.
Well, and going back to Leboki for a second, I felt like you said, his four-seamer was awesome, and his location stuff was great. First 20 pitches. I think this, he hadn't pitched for 2 years now, and it's the first time he's been on a mound. a real mound and pitching against competition. You know, I felt like that's the reason why I'm not being critical of Brownie, but, you know, trying to let him, and I know what they do, and Corb's got the same philosophy. They want to see him get out of situations. I get that. But I felt like with LeBoke, it maybe was a little unfair to him.
Yeah, and I get it too. It's one of those things where I think they cost themselves games early in the year, but they know what they have when they get to Omaha.
Right.
You know, Jerry Stackhouse has used some similar reasoning, although I think that Tim recruits with a little different margin of error. But yeah.
Yeah.
What else caught your eye?
I was happy for Espinal to be able to catch that fastball and rip it. That kid was on a cloud running around the bases. That's good stuff from him. Again, his defense behind the plate, the way he bounces around back there, he's really, I'm excited about him if he can hit the ball consistently. I mean, he doesn't have to hit a lot. If he can hit 250 and catch the way he catches, I think we've got options defensively. You know, I think you're going to see a lot of interchangeable parts. There's a lot of kids on this team that can do a lot of the same things and play a lot of different positions. So if one kid gets cold, you take him out of the lineup for a while, let him sit, and bring in another kid with equal ability. I think you see a lot of that. And so if a kid's not doing his job, I think we got people waiting in the wings that can fill in for a week or two.
Well, the one thing that's going to make this complicated is you got an abundance of those outfield DH types that are right-handed hitters. Because I'm looking and going, well, you don't know if McKenzie could end up playing a lot. You don't know if, you know, could Bulger DH some? Maybe. Who else? I'm leaving a couple guys out here. Polk and McKenzie are both right-handed hitters, and so I'm thinking, and so is Hewitt. There would be some optimal thing here to where one of these guys was a left-handed hitter, and you could say, well, that's easy. They start this guy in left or DH when there's a righty, and this guy when there's a lefty. But because these guys are all right-handed hitters, unless Lanieve or Rogers, J.D. Rogers, kind of breaks in that little group of things, it's a little bit harder to play the matchup, so maybe get some of these guys some time.
Well, you know, at the end of I don't know if you've watched the entire Texas game, but in the ninth, and this is where the 10-run rule it's not in effect, was good because we got to see Chris Maldonado play. We got to see Ivan Arias go to shortstop. We got to see Lanieve play and get an at bat. J.D. Rogers was actually on deck when we made the third out in the ninth. So he was getting some other guys in there. To me, guys that are going to play every day and need to play every day is Hewitt, Bradfield. That infield played well. Diaz had a couple of miscues, but he's going to be fine, I think. And then catcher and right field are the two positions that could be in flux a little bit.
I felt like Diaz hit the ball a little better this weekend.
Much better. No, I was going to say that. Even when some of his outs were loud, he hit the barrel much better, had much better at bats, was more selective at the plate. I was fine with Diaz. And someone we're leaving off here, Parker Nolan. He had a great weekend.
Oh yeah, he was really good.
And that's key for this team. I think he's huge. Now, R.J. Austin looks great, too. I love that kid's energy, the way he bounces around. He looks like, to me, he could play any infield position. I think he's an athlete, and I love R.J. Austin. I think he's going to be really something special, too.
I can't comp their offense to one particular team, and when you've covered 20 of them, they start to kind of run together. But this feels like some of his pre-national title teams where they had really good offenses and up and down the lineup. Like 11, this isn't a great comp because they had a stud in the middle of that in Westlake, and maybe Shrek ends up being that guy that's just a power bat that's hard to pitch around. But they would hit the gaps, hit doubles, hit triples. Man, they had 5 triples this weekend. Although that was a product of the park, they'd steal bases. If you made an error, they would bury you. Like the 11 team was like that. It was just relentless. And this I don't know, I can't get a comp in my head to a team, but it kind of had that kind of feel where they were pretty balanced up and down the lineup, and they really worked you.
Well, I can tell you this: that's a huge ballpark. It's the center field is like 410, and then it juts out to 417 at one spot, and the gaps are deep. They're like 380. So there would have been, we hit 2 home runs. If we were playing at home, we would have hit 6 probably. Shrek had a couple of roof scrapers that were caught on the warning track. They would have been out, no doubt, in Nashville.
Yeah, there were a lot of home runs hit this weekend, and I think D1 said more than opening weekend last year. I know you and I both think they're gonna tap down more on the bat tampering, which we both think went on a lot last year. And I know that that's an SEC thing, but I don't know if that was in play this weekend at other places, or guys are just that much stronger, or are the bats just out of the box or that much more potent? I don't know. Are the balls different? I don't know what's going on.
Well, and it could be just coincidence. Who knows? You just don't know yet. I think it's not a large enough sample size yet. But now we get through next weekend and a couple of midweek games, and it's still happening. Then yeah, that may be it. So every manufacturer wants to make their bats the hottest. They want to make it to where the old saying, "Chicks love the long ball," that type of thing. I just think as long as it's legitimate and you're not doctoring the bat, rolling them, or getting them, what's it called when you do the inside of the bat? Not shaved. When you shave the bats, as long as you're not doing anything like that where it's really dangerous when it's coming off the bat so much faster than it's thrown, I don't have any problem with it. But you're right. There was a lot of home runs hit around the country. And in that ballpark the other day, I didn't think it'd give up as many as it did during the tournament. But like I said, we would have hit a bunch if we'd have been in Nashville.
Yeah, I was surprised just because that park is big. More balls got out of there than I thought. And I thought that in that park, you're probably going to throw more strikes because you've got a lot of margin for error to play with, given the dimensions there, the foul territory, all those things. That's really what surprised me, is that the pitching numbers weren't better across the board. Because I know Vandy wasn't the only staff that had trouble with certain things. Arkansas had its issues pitching too. And boy, TCU, Arkansas beat TCU, was it 18-1 on Sunday?
Yeah, their first 2 days, they were great, TCU was. But I guess they ran out of pitching, it sounds like to me, on that third day. And I think maybe you told me, Chris, their starter against us had like a starter of like an ERA of 7 last year, where he pitched before. Yeah. So that tells me they probably had 4 or 5 guys they felt comfortable with, and then it fell off big time.
Yeah, no, that kid also had a 2.70 ERA as a reliever the year before that at Kansas. And, of course, I'm sure they'd seen him being in the same league and all that. And sometimes just a guy in his 5th year. Like, I remember, who was the kid at Austin Peay that played against David Price in 07? Yeah, Kelly was a 4th-year guy that it just kind of worked out. He ended up pitching in the bigs for 10 or 12 years. I mean, sometimes with a guy like that, just that 4th or 5th year, it starts to pop. Maybe that's the case. It wouldn't be the first.
Yeah, it's because when you get to that age, an older kid in college baseball is always better because they're so confident. It's a confidence thing more than anything. You saw that in Tennessee last year. They were probably one of the oldest teams in college baseball. And, guys like Lipschitz and Lipscomb and all them other guys.
This season of the Vandy Sports Podcast has been made possible by my friend Dr. Jody Jones, DDS. When it comes to general or cosmetic dentistry services, Jody is the best in Nashville. Just check out his client list. It testifies to that. He sees movie stars, music stars, athletes, coaches, you name it. Jody is the dentist of choice for stars in Nashville, but he sees regular folks like you and I as well. What people love about Jody's office is the ambiance. It's relaxing, it's friendly. Someone described it to me as a tooth spa. Whether your needs are general or cosmetic, go see Jody today. Call him 615-270-2322. See him at 55 Music Square East, not far from downtown or the Vanderbilt campus. Jody is a former Vanderbilt football player and a huge Commodore booster, so go and talk Vandy sports with him while you're there. Go see Jody Jones today. Thank him for his support of this podcast, because without it, this season would not be possible. Let's talk hoops for a minute. I'm sure you saw the Auburn game. What were your thoughts there?
It's very similar to the Tennessee game. Just to grind it out, Auburn played great defense. I thought our defense in the paint was terrible in the first half. I was really worried about that. You know, the Williams kid was going off, and we didn't seem to have any answers. I just think that's a game we could have really used another big body in there. I was looking to see if at some point we may have played Quentin and Liam together, but I understand why we didn't, because Liam had 2 fouls, and you didn't want to get both your bigs maybe with foul trouble. I just felt like it was another one of those grinded out games. We've now, in this 5-game streak, we've won by 1 point, by 2 points, and by 3 points. And then, of course, we had the 8-point and 11-point win. But it's the way we have to win. We have to play solid. And Ezra right now is playing fantastic.
Yeah, that last possession, and I texted Joey to have him ask Stackhouse. I was watching at home. I watch most of the games from home. I just too much. Mm-hmm. Between covering 3 sports and the SEC side and all I do. But I texted him. Unfortunately, he didn't hear it. But I wanted to ask him about the timing of that play, because Ezra was taking his sweet time bringing the ball up the floor. There was 9 seconds left or something like that when they inbound. I'm thinking he's taking too long. I'd rather leave a little margin for error. But, man, he ended up timing that perfectly.
He really did. And if you look on the replay, Liam Robbins set a screen that actually screened out 3 guys. That one guy was kind of he had a clear path, but he stayed back thinking they were going to do the lob possibly to Liam. And then by the time he got over here, it was too late to block his shot. And to give Ezra a ton of credit for getting it high on the glass, because if he goes up with the normal layup, it's blocked. So he did he just, again, the kids, you can tell he doesn't get too rattled when the situation's like that, and I love that. Not just because he made that shot. And I want to give a big shout out to Trey Thomas. He made 2 of the biggest defensive plays in that game that may have gone unnoticed.
He did. One in particular, yeah.
Yeah, he was. So, you know, we've all been critical, and I've been myself been critical of Trey. But you know, we say, well, all he does is shoot a 3, but he proved us all wrong in that situation.
Well, you know, there was another play, too, late. I thought they defended Wendell Green really well, and I think he ended up getting fouled on I think I've seen worse contact. They had Robbins there as a trail defender. It just didn't go their way, but, like, I even thought on that end of the floor they made some plays when it mattered.
You know, Chris, and again, I talk about officiating all the time, but let's do this. Why is it that you can go a whole game and let bigs bang on each other, and, you know, Liam gets raped, his arms look like he's been in a prize fight when he's through, and vice versa. They all get banged down low, and you can see a guy going to the rim, he gets bumped, and they call foul. I don't understand that. I don't. Officials got to see the film. They got to do their job and study that stuff. The inconsistency of that is just mind-boggling.
Yeah. I mean, you're not the first person to say that.
Yeah, that's a physical basketball game the other night. Those kids have to be worn out after that because they're beating on each other.
Okay, I'm looking up some SEC leaderboard stuff on Sports Reference. Win shares per 40 minutes in the SEC. Liam Robbins, number 1, 0.255. Box plus minus, Liam Robbins, number 1, 13.1. Offensive box plus minus, Liam Robbins, number 1, 9.2. And defensive box plus minus, he's not on there, but I think some of that's because of his team. Offensive rating, he is 5th in the league. Defensive rating, they only go top 10. He's not there. And there's another one I wanted to look up. I think it's player efficiency rating, and I can't. Oh, here it is. And he just keeps going up in this. Like usually you get less efficient the more you're used. Like he was a 32 a couple of weeks ago. He's a 35.2. Next guy on the list, number 2 in the league, Oscar Tshiebwe. He is a full, almost 6 points ahead of him there. And that's ahead of number 2.
Yeah, 2 things I attribute that to, Chris. Number one, first think about this. He's missed 4.5, 5 games, okay? He also is starting to hit the 3. That's what's really put him over the top. He's always been pretty good around the hoop, but the last, in this 5-game winning streak, I don't know, and you could probably look it up. How many threes? What's his 3-point percentage in the last 5 or 6 games?
I'll look it up as you're talking, so go ahead with wherever you were going to go next.
Well, his 3-point percentage has got to be over 50% in those 6 games. Got to be. I know one game he was 3 for 3 or 4 for 4. And listen, I don't know who the 4 ahead of him were, and that one stat you gave, I'm interested to see if any of them are post players or are they guards. That's the other thing.
Which stat?
The stat where you said he was 5th in.
Oh,
I'm not sure which one it was. It was like the 5th.
Well, I mean, he's number 1 in like 4 or 5 of those. So I'm trying to remember the one where he's not number 1, but on the list.
It was like the 4th or 5th stat you read off somewhere in that area. Anyway, because I'm just to see if there's any other post players like that. I could see Tolu.
It was offensive win shares, but that's a function of playing time. The guys ahead of him were Kobe Brown, Brandon Miller, Oscar Tshiebwe, Wade Taylor, and Tyrese Radford, all of whom have played a lot more than he's played.
Okay, so really only one post.
Yeah, I mean, per minute, he's the best player in the league, statistically.
I think so. And getting ready to come with next is how in the world can you leave him off the All-SEC team? Now, I don't know if that's a 10-man.
I'll tell you how. And I'm not arguing this, right? I think I'd put him on the first or second team, but the minutes played, and see, that's a big stat for me because coaches generally play their best players more minutes. I'll leave it at that. Like Anthony Black's number 1 on the list, 959. Number 10 on the list is Meechie Johnson at South Carolina. Let me find Robbins. Because
do this for me, Chris. I'm sorry, excuse me. Do this for me.
No, it's okay.
Take out the 5 games he didn't play, okay? Because Stackhouse has no reason he can't play him when he's injured, okay? So take those 5 out. Let's just take the game. I thought there was another one where he did Alabama. Did he only play half of a game there or something? Maybe that was
yeah, he played. That was his first game back, and they were getting blown out.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's just say, for argument's sake, 5 games where he didn't play very many minutes or no minutes, 0 minutes. So if you take those other games, where does he?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a minute.
Well, what I'm saying is, okay, did the other guys play 30? We're at game 27 on the schedule. All right. Yeah. Are we comparing this to 22 games and somebody else has played 27 games, or how are we comparing this?
Well, I'm just going total minutes on the year, right? And for example, Anthony Black at Arkansas, if you take the minutes and divide it by 40, he's played 11 full games more than Liam Robbins has played, and then another 10 minutes or whatever it is. Now, again, some of that is take out the time he missed. But even then, like if you could factor that in, he wouldn't be in the top 10 in minutes played.
Okay, that's what I was wanting to find out.
Yeah, I mean he's a full almost 450 minutes behind the league leader in minutes played. No, he's more than that. It's 460, and he's even a good Oh, man. What? 260 off the top 10. So, add 160 minutes back in. Let's say that the 4 games he missed, he plays the whole time. He's still 100 and something minutes shy of cracking the top 10 in minutes. If that makes sense.
No, it does. And then the only other thing I would say to that, Chris, and I'm always trying to play devil's advocate, if you're a post player, where is he with just centers? In other words, fives. In other words, if you're a 5, where is he on minutes played as a 5? Because
Sheboy's in the Sheboy's in the top 10 at 827. KJ Williams is number 5 overall, 867. Brandon Miller, he's not really a post. He's got 881. So there's a few bigs in there. Colin Castleton. Let me see what was doing before he got hurt. Because Castleton,
he was on the floor all the time.
Yeah, he might have been in the top 10. Castleton has played 811 minutes, and that's having missed, 2 or 3 games now where he's been out. So Castleton would have been in the top 10 in minutes easily before he got hurt.
I'll tell you a guy that, like for Tennessee, that started for a long time. He doesn't anymore, I don't think. But like Plavsic, his minutes have to be way down. Because he gets
he doesn't. He doesn't play that many. He doesn't anyway. But yeah, I think I lost you there.
But we've got two games this week, and I've always said the whole year, let's take them 2 at a time. We've got 2 more winnable games. We can continue this streak, I think, this week. Now, again, I worry about LSU like I did South Carolina. I think LSU will play with more energy than South Carolina did. Offensively, they're not very good. Let's just hope it's not one of those nights where they pop up and hit 10 threes or something, because then you can get beat. And that can happen to anybody. So we have to go in with the same type of attitude and carry it through. And then you got Florida without Castleton. I think and you get to play them at home. And I do think this. I'll go ahead and say this. I think Saturday will be the most Vanderbilt fans in the gym. Hear what I'm saying? Most Vanderbilt fans in the gym for an SEC game will be Saturday.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. I mean, barring them losing at LSU, which I would be very surprised if that happened.
Right.
Are you ready for the mailbag?
Absolutely.
The mailbag is sponsored by Sutherland & Belk, a family-owned injury law firm. If you or a loved one has been hurt in an accident, give Taylor or Russell a call, 615-846-6200. See what your rights are and if they can help. I'm just going to take these in order. Ann Arbor Door, how are bats monitored or assessed? These out-of-conference games, are there stickers, for example?
I don't know the answer to that. You may, Chris. I don't know the answer to that.
I believe last year the NCAA had a process in place where they were inspected pre-series, and I don't know that that's changed. And it was those stickers.
I would think.
No, the SEC is making some changes, but that's a different story. So
thank goodness.
All right, I'm just going to go in order of asked, so we're going to go all over the place here. I think you've answered this one before, but maybe not. Hogan wants to know if you foresaw the Temple game fiasco in Mason's first game.
Foresaw it? No. Because think about it. I mean, I think we had 6 or 7 turnovers in the game, so that was part of it. I just remember it was the whole thing seemed disjointed because we had a lightning delay. It was just a bad feel for the whole game. I mean, the whole setup, and you could see in camp that we seemed disjointed. And I felt like, you know how you whistle by the graveyard? That's what I felt like that whole day. Yeah. As it turned out, it was the graveyard.
Well, I remember Vegas wasn't whistling by the graveyard. That's back when I was on the radio and I had a pregame show. And I remember the topic coming up. That line dropped. It had been 17 at one point, and it dropped to 6 the day of the game. And What?
Wow.
Everybody's like, what's going on here? Like somebody knew something. I still don't know what that was about.
Well, we saw that in basketball the other day. Who would have thought Alabama would have been a 3.5-point underdog to Tennessee?
Well,
But
I
the
can
Vegas-
defend that one, but I'll let you finish and I can tell you why.
Well, what I was going to say is how Alabama had not had that many turnovers in a long time. Maybe the Oklahoma game, but Alabama they just dribble the ball off their foot. It almost looked like the fix was in.
Well, I would have taken Alabama to win that game, but the computers, that is exactly where the computers had the line. Was it 3.5? The predictive ones had it right there, 3.5. So I guess Vegas was just going off what the computers had. Now look, Tennessee didn't have Josiah Jordan-James or
Phillips.
Somebody else. So there were a couple. It was Julian Phillips. So like that wasn't exactly apples to apples, but it was interesting that the line ended up being exactly what the computers had it being.
Yeah, that how that happens, I still don't. Because if Tennessee and Alabama play again in the SEC tournament, who do you think would be favored on a neutral floor?
Well, I think we both know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I don't know. I just don't think you can project how they had that many turnovers. Because that was what the game was. It was 19 turnovers to like 8.
I can explain that a little bit too. Tennessee is very aggressive. It's very handsy, and Tennessee's playing at home. And the game is going to be called a lot different in your arena than it is in somebody else's.
Yep, that's true. That's true.
And that goes for everybody. I'm not picking on Tennessee there, but okay. SR Kane, what do you expect from the rest of the basketball season? I fear we'll lose to LSU because they are talented and bound to have a good shooting game. Don't foresee us winning at Rupp, but think we will win against Florida and Mississippi State. Either way, it'll be a fun sprint to the SEC tournament.
Well, look, and I'll to state, be Captain Obvious here, but we can win them all, we can lose them all, and that's very true. I think that if we keep playing at the level we're playing, we didn't play our best game against Auburn. We really didn't. I felt like that we left a lot on the table offensively. Now, you give credit where credit's due with Auburn's defense, and I still don't think we've played 40 minutes of defense in a game yet. I think we still can be better defensively as a team. So, 3-1 would be my guess if you hold the gun to my head, 3-1. But like I said, win them all or lose them all. We really could.
I thought they had a shot in Rupp until about a week ago. Kentucky showing up and playing the way it has, I think, and it's going to be senior day for whatever that's worth. And Kentucky's got something to play for.
Right. I will say this. Sometimes senior day, and any coach will tell you this, they hate senior days because it's a distraction. And I don't know how Kentucky does theirs, whether they do it before the game at halftime or I don't know how it works, or post-game. I know Jim Foster always did it after the games, and I always thought that was the smartest thing. Even though you take the chance that you're doing it after a loss, it's still a distraction early on, the emotions and stuff, because you can play poorly for that first 4 minutes and be down 10 or 15 points. So that part of it I kind of like.
Yeah, well, it seemed to me like Kevin Stallings was like 2 for 15 on senior days. It just seemed like that his teams always played their worst game on senior days.
I agree. It just really did seem that way.
Other than when Shane Foster, got his
rain down 3.
Got his body possessed by something not from this world that night. So yeah, I guess it pays to be close to God. Let's see.
Yeah, it does.
Godors 94. Do you recall the story of Ron Mercer's recruitment to Vanderbilt?
Yeah, I talked about this on a previous, but actually when we did that 20-year thing, I think I talked about this. Ron was not going to come to Vanderbilt. There was a provost who said he's not getting in. She said he's not coming to Vanderbilt. I don't care. He's not getting in. His transcript isn't good enough, this, that, and the other. And that was that. And also, and I've said this, Coach Van Bredikoff let Drew recruit the kids. Jan kind of stepped back and left it up to the Maddox family because, he had lived with Drew and Ray. And he felt like they know him better than I do, so I'm going to kind of step back. And I'm not sure that was helpful. And then, of course, Kentucky's always got
an awkward spot.
It does, doesn't it? And then you have Kentucky. If they really want somebody, you're not going to pry them away for obvious reasons. Let's just believe we all know what I'm talking about.
All right, Ann Arbor, Luke, who was your favorite coach to work for and why?
Well, I've said this before as well. I loved a lot of them, a whole lot of them. Bobby Johnson, he was just a class individual. What a class man. But there's been a lot of great guys. I worked for 11 different coaches at Vanderbilt, head football coaches, and other sports as well, coaches. So, but football coaches, which what you're talking about, and I have to say Bobby Johnson was as class as anybody.
Raiders 1967, if Luke White is in charge of establishing priorities for construction of new facilities for Coach Lee's football program, what are your top 3 priorities, and how do those appear to be met in the renderings for the new facilities that were released?
Well, the first thing I would have done, and they may have done this, I don't know. I hadn't asked Clark this. I would have my seniors and maybe some juniors, or just guys on the team that you trust, say, guys, what's most important to you? Locker room, training room, stadium. Which is your most important thing to you when you went on your official visit, or if you were to start your recruitment all over again and go on official visit? What do you look for? And that's what I would do and spend the most money and time on. I don't care what a coach's office looks like. You know what I mean? That's not as important as obviously a locker room. To me, the locker room, training room, and where you eat, the dining facility. One thing Vanderbilt's always lagged behind in that I think, and hopefully the new project will solve this, is having a place for the players like a player lounge. They've had a little small area, but they've never had a big, nice one like I saw at Clemson. And I think that's one thing that the new facility really needs to do, is have a place, because that's where you build camaraderie. And the guys in there shooting pool together, playing ping pong together, or what other games they play nowadays. Because it means they're hanging out at the facility, and that's good.
Raiders 1967, what player on Vanderbilt's current football roster does Luke believe will be a pleasant surprise for those of us, I can't speak today, for those of us who haven't viewed the players in person nearly as much as Luke has at games or practices?
Well, I'm not going to mention the obvious guys like Taylor and Mahoney, but I will mention, I do think it's the defensive backs. I think you're going to see guys like Gaskins and maybe Wharton and some other guys that didn't play last year, and you'll be pleasantly surprised with their development. I think that's what you're going to see. I don't want to single out one guy, but I do think that position, the secondary, is where you're going to see the most improvement.
Is that based on info or just gut feeling?
But watching them in practice.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, Vanderbilt basketball, can you talk about the disparity between Andy Katz's ranking of Vanderbilt at 24, the RPI ranking of 47, and the net ranking of 88? Is there particular rankings that Vandy fans should pay more attention to than the others? Wins aside, is there a perceived magic number ranking that we should be paying attention to, i.e. 60 in the net, etc.?
I defer to you on that, Chris, because I don't. Again, I just look at it two at a time. I'm not the person to talk to about that part.
Okay,
go ahead.
Well,
you can handle it.
I study this stuff a lot when Vanderbilt's involved or not, just because I sort of enjoy it. But okay, Andy Katz's ranking, that was his power rankings. That means nothing. Nor does the AP poll or the USA Today poll or my ranking of teams or your ranking of teams or anything like that. The RPI ranking means nothing. That's not used anymore. The net ranking is 88. That means something, but what means more is what you did. Look, net is a sorting criteria, right? And people have been Vanderbilt fans are very critical of net, which Go figure. The rating system that doesn't like your team is the one that you hate. And I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but I will tell you this. You probably need to be grateful about some aspects of that, and this is what I mean. Vanderbilt, I think they use these more to sort quads. In other words, they want to see what you did against different levels of teams, right? And they've got to have some compass to figure that out. Well, right now, Florida on the road is a quad 1 win. So the computers like Florida. People have been bashing Florida, saying they're not as good. I agree. Well, guess what? That's quad 1 win because Florida's a top 75 net team, and Vanderbilt got that on the road. Same with Auburn. Do I think there are 30 teams better than Auburn? I probably do at this point. But guess what? Auburn is number 30 in the net today. Now, if Auburn drops one more spot from 30 to 31, that is a quad 2 win and not a quad 1 win. So all the fans out there that are bashing the net, not that it matters. It's not like the committee is going to say, the Vandy fans don't like the net, so we're going to wipe that out. It's not how it works. But what I'm saying is there are things, I don't think it's the ranking that matters so much. Now, look, I think there's some, you can't use a system and fall on it and say, well, you know, they're 215 in the net, but their resume is this, so we're going. No, I mean, at some point, you can't lean on a system and say that the number besides that team's ranking is meaningless. So I don't know what the committee's tolerance is. If it's after 80, I think somebody got in 2019 with a 73 net. I think it was New Mexico. While you had NC State, which was a 33, got left out. So that's the thing. They do look within the net at certain things. And I think they probably dig in on those wins a little bit more too. But if you want to comp for what they are, I would check out Rutgers last year. Rutgers got in the tournament with an 80 net. Now, it had a worse out-of-conference strength of schedule. It had 2 quad 4 losses, whereas Vanderbilt had 1. I think both teams had a quad 3 loss, or Vanderbilt's got 1, maybe Rutgers didn't have any. But the difference was, I think Rutgers had 8 or 9 wins against teams that were seeded 12 or better that made the field. And I think about most of those were top 7 teams, top 7 seeds in the field. And Rutgers had several against teams that were like 2 and 3 and 4. So Rutgers really had some high-end wins, about 2 to 2.5 times more than Vanderbilt's got right now. Vanderbilt's wins, Tennessee right now is going to be a 3 in the net. In fact, they said that this weekend when the committee released its preliminary. The other teams right now, the other wins, I think Arkansas, Auburn, and Pitt would all be in right now. But you're probably going to be seeing those teams seeded anywhere from 8 to 11. So they've got 4 wins against teams that are going to be in the field. But the difference between them and Rutgers a year ago is Rutgers' wins. Rutgers had, for one win that Vanderbilt had of the Tennessee caliber, Rutgers had about 4 or 5. And Rutgers got sent to Dayton. So that's the one, and it's year to year, it's different, right? It's not... Right. I can't tell you for sure until I started comparing them against the field this year, which I've not done yet. I mean, that takes hours of research to do, and I haven't had the time yet. And frankly, they haven't been in position to be that relevant yet. And if they get there, I'll do it. But if you just want having nothing else to look at Rutgers last year, and a lot of fans have leaned on conference record for Vandy, which at best could end up 12-6. Well, Rutgers was 12-8 last year in the Big Ten. That's better than the SEC. So I think a lot of the things that fans are holding their hopes on, I'm not sure that the committee is going to feel the same way. And again, that I think their resume, that's the obvious comp last year. Rutgers was worse at the bottom, a lot better at the top. And the other metrics, league record, that kind of thing, overall record, net were about the same, and Rutgers got sent to Dayton. But again, could be different this year. I haven't done the work on this year, but it's going to be tough. I think they have to win out in the regular season to feel great about it. If they get 3 and maybe they get one or two in Nashville, then I think maybe they got a chance, but that's going to depend on other people, and I don't think it's a slam dunk.
Okay, well let me stop there, and here's my point. After you speaking, it's brought up two or three things in my mind. Number one, let's go back to the first year when we had our first podcast and we talked about Vanderbilt, and you said that they were predicted to win 2 conference games, to beat to beat South Carolina and Ole Miss at home. That was it. So we were only favored in 2 games. That's the first thing. So now we've accomplished.
Is that this year or was that last year?
No. This year.
No, Ken Palm. Well, before the season, Ken Palm had them going, I think, 7-11 in the SEC.
Where did the favorite come from?
Oh, okay. I know what you're talking about. That was individual. In other words, like if you're a 45% favorite to win in every game, so you got 18 games, you're 45% favorite to win every time. Game by game, you're going to be 0-18. The computer's going to say you're an 8-10 team, if that makes sense.
I see, because I was thinking any computer that tells you we're going to be 2-16, you might as well unplug that computer. That's what I was thinking. Okay, next question. Here we go. Or this is a fact, actually. I know, and I don't even remember what year this was, but I knew 2 people that were on the selection committee. And I don't know if these rules are still the same. You may know. If a coach in your conference or someone is on the committee, so let's say someone that was at Vanderbilt, and I'm going back to C.M. Newton and I'm going back to Terry Holland here. I know for a fact we got in one year just because of 2 guys being friends. So the human element is what I'm talking about. Think about this.
Would that have been Stallings last year?
It may have been. I don't know the year, but I can tell you this. I just knew for a fact because I was told this by one of those individuals. So the human element is something that we can't factor in. Who in that room has a vendetta against a Vanderbilt or a vendetta against a Tennessee? That's the stuff you can't measure. And that's the part to where you get a weird thing where how did they get in and how they didn't? Sometimes it has nothing to do with stats. It's like, okay, is there a reason we could get them in? Let's put them in because so-and-so likes them and he does too. And then, unfortunately, that's life. We all have biases, and I think that's the part that we don't figure in. It's not just the numbers.
To be honest, it's not super hard to predict the field. I mean, 30 teams are getting in anyway, and then you can have another 25 or 30 that like if Kansas doesn't win the conference tournament, Kansas is getting in. They're not all that easy, but like I've had a year or two where I think I had a year where I might have nailed them all, and I've had one or two where I've only missed one or two. And it's not that hard. You're really only dealing on the margins with maybe
4 to 16.
Yeah, and sometimes the committee will do something really screwy that doesn't make any sense at all. So that's the factor that I watch. Like I thought A&M last year, based on if you counted all A&M's games and just said they did this against this quad and that against that quad and they beat these teams, it was laughable that they left Texas A&M out a year ago.
Okay, one other question while it's on my mind. Does it matter what the teams that we lost to, like a Memphis, a VCU, a Southern Miss, that are probably again as an at-large, Grambling by winning their comp? Does that factor in at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think losing to Memphis hurts them all that much. Although they're 10-5 at home, and that might be something the committee looks at a little bit sideways. I think really their issue, and I know everybody circles the Grambling loss, and yeah, that was a big deal. I heard Gary Parrish say this morning that a quad 4 loss is basically like losing 2 games, and so you take that one off and it gets better, but they still had stuff to do. Like even if you turn the Grambling loss into a win, I don't think they're in the field today. Now, right. Where they missed their opportunity was not picking up a win against. It was that, but it was also not beating a Memphis or a Southern Miss or a St. Mary's. If you look at teams, and I'll size this up quickly. I'll just call these teams. It'll be 13 seeds or better if they get in. That's Memphis, Southern Miss, St. Mary's, VCU, Pitt, NC State, Missouri, Tennessee, Arkansas, Alabama, Kentucky, A&M, Alabama. How many is that?
Oh, I stopped. I wasn't counting, but it's got to be.
Well, I'll count them. I'll go game by game.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
I'll count them this time.
Memphis 0-1, Southern Miss 0-2, St. Mary's 0-3, VCU 0-4, NC State 0-5. I'm sorry, I missed Pitt. That's 1-5. Missouri 1-6, Tennessee 1-7, Arkansas 2-7, Alabama 2-8, Kentucky 2-9, A&M 2-10, Alabama 2-11. Tennessee 3-11, and Auburn 4-11. That's their problem.
Okay, but now I've also heard this, and I think it was you that told me this. They don't look at a difference if you lose by 2 or win by 2 against a good team.
Right. Well, no. That's how the net works. The net is a sorting mechanism, right? The net is like a compass. It's like saying, because otherwise, here's what you get, right? You could say, well, UNC Asheville's 16-2 in the Big South. Conference record, dominate. Okay, well, the net is a thing to sort of quantify the stuff that we already know, that the Big South is not as good as the SEC. And it basically 100% of the time gets that right. Now, it will miss on the edges, right? And I even heard Ken Pomeroy say this once. Like, Wisconsin used to every year be rated, everybody like, how are they that good? And Ken Pomeroy himself even said, no, I don't think Wisconsin is as good as my computer spits out every year. But generally speaking, like, you don't see stuff like, and the net very much tracks with Ken Pom. And here's the principle behind predictive computers that people don't understand it. Let's say that Vanderbilt is playing against Houston, and let's say that, let me just pick a team at random. Wisconsin, Milwaukee is also playing against Houston. You want to compare those teams, right? Let's say that Vanderbilt loses, and I'm going to be absurd with the comparison to make the point, okay? Let's say that Vanderbilt loses to Houston on a neutral floor all 10 times it plays by 1 point. Let's say that Wisconsin, Milwaukee, or maybe they just go by Milwaukee now, plays Houston 10 times, it goes 1-9. The one game it wins is 1 point. The 10 it loses by an average of 50. Who would you not want to play? Vanderbilt or Milwaukee? Just based on that. That's what predictive computers do. And the problem that Vanderbilt has got is that a lot of these games, they played everybody close. The wins were close. The losses to, good grief, Alabama A&M. Alabama A&M, I think, is in the 320s in the net. That's where it is in Sagarin. Or not Sagarin, in Ken Pom. The problem is that was a 1 point game. It ended up being an 8 point game, but like South Carolina, 200 and something in the net. That was an overtime win here. The problem is Vanderbilt's games were close, most of these. And the computer says, okay, well, you're 8 points off Alabama A&M. You're probably not that good. You win these games, you win close, you beat South Carolina close, you're probably not that good. Now that gets even out. You play in Alabama close, you beat a Tennessee, you do things like that, and those things start to go back in your favor. But all the computer's doing is saying over the course of the season, we take all that body of work over those 27 games, and we make a calculation based on that. Now, what the committee will do is they'll look at that and say, okay, Vanderbilt's 87 is 87 in the net, but it's got some good wins, and we think there's a better team than that. There's latitude for committees to make decisions like that. That's why they meet. But for people wondering why they're so low in some of the computer metrics, that's it.
Okay, and final question. How much does it weigh on a team, let's take Florida, for example, who has lost their best player for the year? How much does that weigh in on selection?
I don't know if they'll dig in at the level to say Vanderbilt won at Florida when it had Castleton. That's getting pretty deep because you got to do that for a bunch of teams. But they do look at, for instance, they might say, well, Robbins was out 4 games. They lost 3 of them. Now, if you look at those games, The only game that he might have made a difference in, well, I shouldn't say make a difference. I think they lost two of them pretty badly, and then one was that A&M game that was pretty close. They will consider that. I don't know if they'll go back and say, well, they beat Florida with Castleton or without, and that one's going to even out either way because they're going to get one with him and one without him.
I don't remember what year it was, but there was a year when a team had like 20 wins and looked like to be a shoe-in for a tournament. Lost two starters the last week of the season and didn't get in the NCAA. That's my point. So if let's say Vanderbilt and Florida are on the bubble, this is for argument's sake, say it comes down to them two, would they take a Vanderbilt that was 100% healthy over a Florida that didn't have a Castleton?
Probably.
That's what I'm saying. I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
And I just don't know if it's like the last 10 games of your season used to count for a lot. I'd always heard that. Now you don't hear that anymore. But, I don't. But we've been on this for 30 minutes. We better move on, or we're going to lose listeners.
Well, let me. Well, and I'm done after this anyway. I think we're out of questions, but I know a lot of people. Here's the thing: like, look at the schedule again. Let's say they win at VCU. Let's say that they beat NC State, which was a 4-point loss. Let's say they beat Missouri on the road, which is a 3-point loss. Just give them just enough to win all those by one game. They probably don't move up in the net more than 4 or 5 spots, but at that point, I would bet just flipping those from losses to wins would get them in right now. And that's where the committee comes in. Because the committee is generally deferred to teams that get big wins. In my watching of that, no, the wild card is once you start taking on a lot of bad wins, or you have something like a bad out-of-conference resume, which is what cost A&M a year ago.
Right. Which will cost Vanderbilt if they don't make it this year.
Right. I think that's the thing that I think people are missing. It was the not cashing in on those early opportunities because, I mean, being 4-11, now that's a lot of games against good teams, but being 4-11 against teams that are going to be playing in the NCAA tournament, and more of those probably closer to the 11 than the 4, I think the committee is going to look at that and say, if we're going to put a team in the tournament, let's look at how they played against teams that are in the tournament. And that's why I think even if they went out, I think they'd get in at that point, but I think that's why even 3-1 is probably dicier than people think.
One thing I think is true, and we've talked about this to the people that are critical of Stackhouse who aren't critical, you have to they're both true. In other words, you have to own your 7-6 non-conference just as much as you own your 6-game winning streak or 5-game winning streak. So they both happen. They're both true. What happens, and this is human nature, would you rather have lost 5 in a row right now and went 10-3 in non-conference? It all factors in, so it doesn't matter. It's just because it's happening now as we move toward the end of the season that gets people either jumping on a bandwagon or jumping off of a bandwagon. So they're both truths. There was poor decision-making, whatever you want to say, and poor play early on, and you have to give all the credit the last 5.
Well, let me give you the last. I was going to say that on the last, the pre-conference versus the non-pre-conference, you sort of have to protect the teams that don't get a chance to play a lot of teams by putting some emphasis on that. That's when that's when Murray State. That's one of the few times a Murray State or somebody might have a chance to pull off a big win because they're not going to get them in their conference. Although now it's not the OVC anymore, so it's a little different. But you get what I'm saying. Now, sure. The thing that I think, if I were on the committee, I would factor in, because I think this is different now. I think with the portal and everything, your rosters are so different. It's not like it was when we grew up, and like you could name every team in the conference as starting 5 for next year, the day after the season was over. Because kids roll over to the same school time and time again, and so you didn't have the issues of roster continuity. I think that's a fair point in favor of kind of a recency bias, is that it may take a long time for a roster of new kids to gel. How much the committee considers that, I don't know.
it'd be hard, Chris, because there are, like you said, there's so many teams that fit in that, and out of 300 and something teams, that's awfully hard to garner all that. I agree. That'd be tough.
Yeah. Now, the one thing I will say, the bubble may not be super great. I mean, North Carolina is right there. I think they're like one of the first teams out or first, and North Carolina is yet to get a quad one win. Now, if I'm on the committee, there's no way I'm putting that team in. But the fact that Carolina is right there, now its other metrics are a lot better than Vanderbilt's, and that's kind of one of the differences. Plus, you can't tell me the committee's going to forget they were the same guys that came within a couple of minutes of winning it all last year. And I'm not sure that shouldn't matter if you're trying to field a competitive event. I mean, if I were in the room, I'd be lying if I told you that wouldn't be in the back of my head. But I compared them to Rutgers, so you just don't know what that comp is like this year comparing it against the field. But that metric of teams that I think will be in the tournament, that's going to be tough to overcome, and there's not a lot more chances to do that if that's the way they look at it.
Right, and I have one more comment to that point, Chris. I've seen in the past, and you probably have too, unfortunately, let's say North Carolina and Colorado have the same resume. Who do you think they're going to take? Because for television ratings,
of course.
And that's the part that I can't stand. Let's take the best team. Take the name off the jerseys. But again, that doesn't happen because you get the human factor.
Well, I'll give you a story of another one I've heard in another sport. There was a team taken one year that was like it got in, and people were like, "Whoa, how did that happen? Mm-hmm. We didn't have them on our bubble." And the rumor at the time was that one of the ADs on the committee fancied that guy as his next coach.
See, there you go.
Now that may be urban legend, that may be hearsay. I'm not going to name names. I'm not even going to name a sport, but you do have people are human and stuff happens, man.
It does. Yeah. Well, it's been great discussion. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a lot because there's some things that I didn't understand about the net and KenPom, but that makes more sense now.
Yeah, I don't think people need to get too tied into some of those things. But anyway, man, I went way longer than I planned. Hey, thanks for joining us, and I guess we'll catch you next week after the UCLA series, and then LSU and Florida. 2 games they should win in basketball, and if they do, then this is a discussion we can have next week too.
Let's do it. Have a great one, Chris.
All right, thanks, Luke. Thank you for listening to today's episode. We thank our presenting sponsor, Jody Jones DDS. We thank our other sponsors, Sutherland and Belk, Michael Kendrick of the Kendrick Group, and MyPerfectFranchise.net. If you're interested in sponsoring this podcast, and that's how we make this work, please email me at chrisley70@gmail.com. We also ask that you subscribe to our website, vandysports.com. That is $99 a year. You get things there that you don't get here. And of course, please rate, review, and subscribe where you see our podcast. That helps us get noticed. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at vandysports.com. Follow me at chrisley70. And finally, subscribe to our Vandy Sports YouTube channel as well. Thank you for listening to the Vandy Sports Podcast, which is part of the 440 Network. I'm your host, Chris Lee. We'll catch you with another episode coming very soon.